So remember that parenting is a long game, and where your kids land is what matters, not where they are right now. Welcome to the first ever episode of Shoot Straight Parenting Podcast, where we talk about how to aim high, shoot straight, and launch children for success.
I am Ted.
And I'm Jen.
And we are really excited to be starting this podcast. We've talked about it for quite some time. So we have our earphones on and our microphones set up, and we are just ready to go.
Yeah. So, honey, why did we actually want to start a podcast? I mean, there are a lot of other podcasts out there.
Well, first and foremost, we've been parents for decades, over 2 decades so far, and will be for quite some time. Now, when I say that, I'm talking about the time frame when our children are at home.
Yeah, kind of like active parenting.
Active parenting. We'll be hopefully parents for a long time after that.
I hope.
But we'll be somewhere around 25 or 26 years by the time the last one is out of the house. So
yeah, close to 30.
But we do still have 4 at home. So much more content that we don't even know about yet.
And while you were saying that, and we're sitting here, I was kind of thinking another reason why we wanted to start a podcast, although we didn't realize it at the time. It's kind of like going on a date. We get to sit here, have a conversation with no kids in the house.
And you should all see Jen with her earphones on. She is looking good.
Okay, honey, I just need to stop you right there because that's the second time you've said that now. They are not earphones. They are headphones. So there are a lot of parenting podcasts, but a lot of them are very niche. Right? There are podcasts for parents of homeschooled kids or parents of toddlers. Maybe you have a strong-willed kid and you really need some advice about that. And that's great. We all have seasons where we need some of that input. I certainly did. But we wanted this to be a pretty broad parenting podcast because, our parenting kind of covers the gamut.
Yeah, it does. A little bit about our parenting experience. So, we've had kids in public school, kids in private school, kids in college, a few of the kids out of the house, some of the kids still at home. And
yeah, even homeschooled for about 10 years.
Yeah, right. It's just, it hasn't been necessarily a straight road for us. There have been a lot of twists and turns. And
yeah, for sure. I mean, we were both single parents for a while.
Yep, and we're a blended family.
We've even had the adoption journey. Not the way that most people have it, right? Looks a little bit different, but even things like, what the births looked like. Some of the kids were born at home. Some of them were born in the hospital. I've been a stay-at-home mom. I've been a working mom.
Yeah, and I've traveled a lot for work. When I'm not traveling, I work from home. We're not necessarily professional doctors, psychologists when it comes to raising children, but we're definitely professional parents. And we just think that gives us street cred.
We definitely have street cred. All right, so why don't we tell people about our family? Because we're probably starting to sound a little bit weird by now.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you start?
So our oldest is 23. He just finished up his 4-year tour in the Marine Corps. So proud of that kid. He is just kind of stepping back into civilian life and starting the next thing.
Yeah, the next one, and I'm not going to get the ages perfect. Jen has them memorized. I don't. I think the next one is 21. And he is a high school English teacher. So I'll talk about many things that make me feel old. That's definitely one of them. But he's just a fantastic teacher who's pouring into his students and just has a passion for teaching, which really comes from both sides of our family. Skipped my generation, but he's jumped back into it. And he reminds me a lot of my father, who was a teacher for his whole life. And it's just fantastic to see.
Definitely proud of that one. He is actually, in fact, 22. So the next one is 21. She's our oldest daughter. She started working with special needs kids when she was in high school and came straight out of high school and went into the ABA therapy industry. And so she's been working in that for a couple of years. Just has the most beautiful soul. Absolutely love that girl. She is also, just to let you guys know, financially stable. She lives on her own. She is quite pretty. She is drama-free, and she is very single. So just putting that out there.
Nice. She's going to appreciate that. Our next one is 20.
Correct.
Is that correct? Yeah, he is a junior in college down at Louisiana Tech, and he's more like me than the English teacher. I would never admit what I got on my English SATs, but I kicked butt in math, and that's what he's doing down in an engineering program. He's a man of few words, but he's kind of owning that town, that little town in Louisiana where the college is. So it's good to see that difference. A quiet kid who really just grunts, going down to a whole new part of the country and really doing great things there.
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping that he's doing great things. There's a chance we might never find out because he is pretty much sworn to stay in the Deep South for forever. So the next one is 19, another boy. This one is also in the Marine Corps. He is stationed about an hour away from us, which is awesome. We absolutely love it. What's even better is that his girlfriend is also an hour away. She's in the opposite direction, which means, and those of you who have adult children who still tend to kind of come back home here and there, you'll know what I mean when I say it's kind of nice that he's not coming back home every single weekend. So love to be able to see him. He's doing great things in the Marine Corps, really loves his job, and that just makes a mama's heart happy when you know your kids love their job.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see him when he comes home, and they'll understand someday what we mean by we don't need to see you every weekend. But let me go back real quick. I forgot to mention our daughter-in-law. So the high school English teacher was married in March, so it's still relatively new, sorry. But she is just a blessing to the family and kind of one of our kids.
Yeah. And to be honest, I think having a daughter-in-law makes me feel older than having been a mom for several decades, which, you know, is also true.
Yeah, just wait until grandkids come along. So the next two are both seniors, and they...
Boy and a girl.
Boy and a girl, and both 17 still.
Correct.
Right, they're both within 6 or so months of their 18th birthday, and they're both in budding relationships, high school relationships, but nice, healthy relationships, and we're really proud of them for that.
Yeah, you'll definitely hear me say that normally high school relationships are just practicing breaking up. My kids get so sick of hearing that, but we really love these two. We hope they stick, and if not, then my words will have rung true once again.
Yes.
And then our last two, another boy and a girl. The boy is in 10th grade and our youngest daughter is in 9th grade, so 15 and 14. So if you did not catch that, we have a 23-year-old, 22-year-old, 21-year-old, 20-year-old, 19-year-old, two 17-year-olds, a 15-year-old, and a 14-year-old. We are right in the thick of it. Quite a few that have been launched, 4 still at home. Our 10th grader is just an absolute joy. He won the school's Servant Leadership Award last year. So awesome kid. He is also the reason we will have an episode titled Naughty Children Change the World, because he was tough when he was little, but just an absolute joy. And our youngest daughter is just a great way to end parenting. She is hilarious. She makes me laugh probably more than any other human. She's really, really easy for a teenage girl. All of our girls have been easy. I think teenagers are fabulous, but it's not all been easy. That's for sure.
Yeah, you hear a lot about teenagers and parents dreading the teenage years, and those have been some of the best years for sure. But I think a lot about what we'll talk about is how we kind of set that up and set ourselves up for good relationships with the kids that paid off when they became teenagers, and then it continues to this day. So listen, it hasn't always been easy. That we've had some situations and things happen that have been really difficult. You know, we've had peaks, but we've definitely had some valleys, and we just figured out a way to work through those.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not been perfect. We have dealt with, and we are still dealing with really tough things. You know, I am a domestic violence survivor. We have had to deal with the things that go along with that, including not just harassment, but true stalking in and out of court a lot of times. You know, some of our kids have had to deal with some pretty serious anxiety, lots of anxiety.
Yeah. And all dealing with it a little bit differently, which hasn't made it easy, but we've learned a lot from every different situation.
Yeah, but we share that just because, you know, we want this podcast to be an encouragement. Yeah, I mean, commiseration is great, right? And Ted's hilarious. We're going to try to bring some lighthearted things into this, and certainly you'll understand and be able to commiserate and go, oh yeah, thank goodness I'm not the only person in the world who deals with kids who leave their laundry all over the floor. But we want to be real as well.
Yeah.
And so we want to be an encouragement. We want this to be something that will bring a little bit of light into what can be really tough, which is, just parenting.
Yeah. And Jen's funnier than she gives herself credit for. Not as funny as I am, but...
So just to be clear, this man is an engineer who is colorblind. So I think we know where the funny is.
But, okay, hold on. You're an accountant. Let's just leave it right there. So, you know why we're starting a podcast. You know who we are. You know a little bit about in case you weren't counting 9 kids.
Yeah, I don't think we actually said yet, but it's 9.
Yeah, and when you called off all of the ages in a row, it sounded like it was 86, but it's only 9. So, Jen, what's your biggest takeaway?
Yes, when we were talking about this earlier, it's funny because I don't know if I've ever really thought about my biggest takeaway, although it is something that I actually talk about a lot. I have a lot of maybe the biggest rule. So what's your first rule or your number one rule for parenting babies or your number one rule for teenage boys? And a lot of people ask me those things because I think just walking anywhere with as many children as we have, people just assume that I'm a super mom. I can't stand that term, but...
Actually, didn't people used to count, didn't they?
Yeah. So people always would count if I was in the grocery store with the kids, and then they would always say, wow, you've got your hands full. That was like the phrase that everybody used. And then... Do you
want to punch them in the face?
I did want to punch them in the face, but I knew that would not be a good example, nor would that be good parenting. So instead, I was so cheesy. All the kids would look back and they would answer and they would say, better full than empty. It was so bad. But it was actually probably good for toddlers. Teenagers, thankfully, don't say that. And typically, I'm not in the grocery store with teenagers any longer. But yeah, so anyway, I have lots of rules for parenting. But I think sometimes maybe the biggest takeaway is actually more important. And so I just want to remind all of you guys, especially those of you who are still kind of right in the heart of it, that parenting is a long game, right? Where our kids land is what matters the most. It's not where they are right now. It's where they land. In the Bible, it says that children are like arrows in the hands of a warrior, and blessed is the man whose quiver is full. And the thing about an arrow is, if you just stop and think about the trajectory of an arrow, if it is going to hit the target for which it was created, it cannot travel in a perfect straight line. It has to have an
trajectory.
Arc. Yeah. And the trajectory is going to have some highs and it's going to have some lows. That is the nature of, how an arrow travels. And I think it's such a great allegory to children because that's really just so true. When you are a mom with a toddler, especially if you've got, a 2-year-old who has a strong will, but really any 2-year-old, if you measure your success by what they look like, at 7:00 in the morning, you will feel like a failure every single day. To be honest, it could be 7:00 in the morning or 7:00 at night, right? There's typically not great entire days with a toddler. Maybe like an entire 8 hours when they're sleeping, and then you can start to love them again, and then it starts over again the next day. But parenting is a long game, and same thing with a 10-year-old boy who tells the same joke 97 times in a row because he has not, that part of his brain has not yet developed where he's got the emotional intelligence to read the room and recognize how annoying he's being, right? The same thing applies with teenagers. If you expect your 12-year-old daughter or your 14-year-old son to get in the car after school and tell you all about their day and be super excited to see you, well, first of all, you have an awesome kid, and, just be thankful for that right then. Typically, we're going to see the worst in our kids. That's just human nature, and we need to be a safe place where they can kind of allow us to see the worst in them. But we're only getting a snapshot. We're not getting an idea of where they're going to land. And it's so important to remember that the seeds that we sow into them, the foundation that we're creating when they're little, the foundational principles, not just of their values and morals, but in how they respond to people and the way they react to situations. All of those things are building and building and building so that eventually, when you're ready to launch them, they're going to have the right trajectory and they're going to land well. And so it's a perspective thing, right? Just remind yourself when you feel like you can't see anything good, that if you're pouring good into them, more than likely, it's not an absolute guarantee, but it's a pretty strong promise, right? That your kids are going to land well if you're intentional and you're doing, you're putting the right things into them. So where they land is what matters. It's a long game. I will tell you this, wine really helps too.
Yes, it does.
So I would ask the same thing of you.
Yeah,
You've been a dad for the same time, 23, 22 years?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
What's your biggest takeaway?
A couple of things. First of all, you've mentioned a couple times perfection. My recommendation would be to not expect perfection out of your kids, but probably not even desire it. And where I'm coming from there is that, I've always wanted my kids to experience things and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And I think, nowadays we see a lot of people who expect perfection. And first of all, it's unattainable. It's absolutely unattainable, but it doesn't set them up properly because nothing is going to be perfect for them once they're out, right? Once they go to their job, whether it's in the interview or when they have a new boss, they're going to have to deal with situations that are not perfect. And in so much as they had an opportunity to deal with those situations when they were younger, it will help them out later. It's not the easiest way, right? But it is worth it.
Yeah.
For sure. The second takeaway is to don't sweat the small stuff. I spent probably my first 5, 7, 8, maybe 10 years
I'd say probably close to
of
10.
being a parent, sweating every small thing that occurred. And luckily, the kids laugh about it even to this day about how I used to react to things. And I was more high strung. I'm way more relaxed now. And so I've learned the value of not sweating the small stuff. And after having done it myself and seeing the downside to that. So, and then lastly, be present. Jenn mentioned someone getting into the car and just talking for 10 minutes straight about their day. Be present in those conversations, because if a child these days, especially these days, with how easy it is for them to just sit down and look at their phone and be oblivious to the world. If one of the kids gets into the car and wants to talk, geez, talk or listen. Yeah. Listen more than talk, but talk to them and take advantage of those situations. And when they walk in the door, coming in from the outside, if they're willing to hang out in the same room with you for a little while, hang out in the same room with them. Because, similar to sitting down in a seat and looking at their phone, they want to go and lay in their bed and look at their phone. And so just take advantage of any and all situations to be there, to spend that time talking, laughing, joking, arguing even. We have great arguments, around in the kitchen, around the dinner table, but they're constructive arguments. They're arguments about good things.
Yeah, for sure. So I almost feel like you had some different seasons of your life, some advice there. So the don't sweat the small stuff is so important when they're little, right? And we'll certainly get into that in some later episodes where we really kind of dive into the things that matter and being able to say yes to the things that are less important, because you have to say no to some things. And then being present is just so important when they're teenagers in particular. I mean, you don't have to really even work on being present with a toddler because they want to be in your presence at all moments. And I would say moms of young toddlers can at least go to the bathroom by yourself and not be invaded by little children. If that's not possible, I understand what that's like. I had that for a lot of years, but it is so important to be present at all stages. We model to our kids putting down our phone for sure, but especially as a teenager. So really good stuff, honey. Thank you for that. I think, that was just a few things that really matter to us, so you can get an idea about just maybe the way that we approach parenting. Obviously, just a couple of small tidbits there, but those are good things. So parenting is a long game. Don't sweat the small stuff. Be present.
Good job. More to come.
Yeah, so we are planning on doing a twice a month podcast right now. We may end up doing a little bit more frequently, but we're thinking every few weeks. We do still have 9 children to parent.
Yes, we do.
Super excited about getting to know you guys. Can't wait to get some feedback from other parents if you had anything that you would want to talk about. So definitely, I'm sure there's some burning questions about parenting, and we have a few burning questions that at some point we would like to get answered too. So maybe somewhere, someone in the universe has the answer to my question, which is, how can I get through a single week without having to Venmo a child?
Yeah, that's a good one. They're expensive.
They are.
Really expensive.
Do you have any burning questions that you would like to ask the...
No, I don't think so. But, I hadn't really thought much about questions from people or...
I think you do have a question.
Okay, here we go. This should be good.
So this is the question that has been burning on Ted's brain for 23 years. How can a child manage to turn on 14 different lights simply to get a drink in the middle of the night?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, absolutely. They still do that. Age doesn't matter there. Payback is coming, though. And it's not only turning all the lights on in their house once they have a house, but there will be crumbs everywhere. There will be doors open. There will be clothes left everywhere. And I'm going to have more years to do that than they had to do at our house.
Yeah, the problem is, if I'm at the house too, is I'm going to go behind you and clean up the crumbs and turn off the lights. And
that's what we call a you problem.
All right. Well, now you got a little bit of an insight into our marriage.
It's interesting, but fun. I love Jen, but we say, more importantly, I like her.
Yes.
And sitting across the table from her doing this is just, it's kind of like a date.
Well, I like you too. And I cannot wait for you guys to join us back here on our next date.